So you do this mediation work. Can you tell us a little bit about like what that actually looks like when you're doing it? What's a typical scenario? Do you have any good stories from the field about, who, without naming names,
Yeah,
the types of parties that are engaged in this mediation that you put yourself in the middle of?
yeah. I mean, for me, it runs the gamut. There's been government organizations, a lot of nonprofits, law firms, and the participants all look different, and they're from different walks of life. 90% of the time, none of them have similar communication styles, which is the source of a lot of the conflict. Uh, but yeah, and identities vary as well. So for a story, this was one of my earliest meetings. It's one of my earliest, and it's one of my favorite mediations because, sorry, my dog is growling at something. But it's one of my favorite stories because it was this very, very contentious, this relationship between manager and his supervisor. His subordinate was he was the manager was the higher up, supervisor was uh, below him on the rank scale. And so the manager was you know, had all the letters, degrees in art and film, and the business was centered around film, and held himself in high regard when it came to his opinions and ideas and critiques on film. And it was a theater, and they were airing a movie that his supervisor, who was uh, an LGBT white woman or LGBTQ white woman who identified as gay, and uh, she had a problem with one of the films that he was airing. And when I came in, I knew that that wasn't, the source. You didn't agree with the movie that is being played, so now you have a conflict so bad you bring in a mediator. And I was like, okay, well, let's get into this. And in the mediation, initially it started very professional and courteous, and everybody's sitting up, and we're actually in the theater, and they're, oh yeah, hey, how was that meeting today? And they're very cordial, very, very polite. And then as soon as it started, I deferred to the woman to start, and there was like a palpable like cloud that came over the mood of the room, and he kind of hunched forward and got this defensive posture, and she immediately became emotional, and was tears were welling up, and she goes on, and they go back and forth. So the woman gives her part of the story, and he gives his part of the story, and from once the stories are done, they immediately start going after each other. Well, that's not how that happened. Well, that's not how that happened. Well, no, that's not what I said. Well, no, that's not. And it was just like, okay. Now, for me, I like to let a fire build a little bit in a mediation. I like to let the emotions build up a little bit and let the people get comfortable with expressing where they're at and how they're feeling, because a lot of times a lot of revelation comes from that. And I'm doing my thing. I'm guiding them through the conflict, asking them questions and all that. And I can see where the source of this conflict is coming from, and I'm doing my best, because a lot of times when you do the telling thing, when you tell someone something, it's a lot less impactful than if you let them come to that conclusion on their own. And I found that to be a very effective thing to do in mediation, is to help guide them to a realization about the conflict and about the other person, or about how they're feeling, instead of just outright telling them. And that's what I was doing here. And I forget the specific question I asked, but uh, the woman she had started crying, and the manager was just, he had that dismissive, like, oh my god, she's crying again. Uh, and I paused, and I said, "Ready, take a 30-second break and take some deep breaths." And then I deferred back to the woman, and I said, what is it about what's happening right now? What is it about this situation that's making you, feel these emotions so intensely? And she like had her hands over her face, and she threw them down, and she was like, "You don't care about my opinion, and it makes me feel like shit." And as soon as she said that, he like reeled up to throw something back at her, and then he stopped and he dropped his hands and he was like, "Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't no, I didn't mean to do that to you." It's like, I absolutely care about your opinion. What do you mean? Like, how could you ever care about your opinion? He thought that this conflict was simply about her not liking his opinion and choice of movie. He thought, and that upset him and that offended him. And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so no, you're a great professional. You have what you." He's like, "I love everything you do, and I absolutely respect your opinion. And I can't believe I made you feel like that." And he just was so apologetic, and his whole body, he opened up his body language and was leaning forward, and he's like reaching his hands out to her, and he's just like, my God. And you can see he was genuinely shaken by this revelation that she had given him. And she was like cry laughing at this point. She's like, "Oh my God." And I'm just like, all right, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool because and I just stepped back at that point. At that point, it's not my job to like help them mend
Hmm.
things. They've already done it. And they both turned to me and were like, "You're great." And I was like, "Yeah." So that's one
Yeah,
of my best stories when it comes to that kind of thing.
that's great. That's great. Those beautiful moments where people kind of recognize that they're all human and they all have sort of really simple needs that
Yeah.
need to be addressed. It's
Yeah.
good
And
in
it's never,
relationships. It's
yeah.
good in parent-child situations. I mean, just those breakthroughs where you connect on a human level.
Yeah.